start tonight with a bit of a boxing gem. This one came out of the blue a few weeks ago, and I chased it up, grabbed hold of the two books, and I've read one of them. I haven't read the second one. Now, the second one, or the first of the books, the second one that I'm going to read is about a guy called Dick Tiger. Now, Dick Tiger I was always a fan of Dick Tiger. Obviously, I never saw him fight in the flesh, but I can always remember watching his fights, or the two or three I'd seen, especially the one he lost, the only time he ever got knocked out, so that's not particularly good. But I'd also calculated that he was at least 39 or 40, probably even older. But what really struck me in this classic piece of old colour film at Madison Square Garden on the first night of the new garden, or some sort of deal like that, it was a great big night, was that he had on his robe, a big robe. Of course, he wasn't even that big, he seemed big. Wasn't that tall, but had on the back Biafra, not Nigerian. It always struck me. It's an intriguing piece of history. Anyway, the guy that wrote that then got interested in the life of a guy called Frankie DePaula. Now, again, you might have to Google and do some searches. And this guy, his life was very, very entertaining. Now, I knew about DePaula. I knew about the whole mob involvement. I sort of knew. I didn't know about it, but I'd heard about it. That's why we're talking about the book in a few moments. Anyway, DePaula and this guy and Dick Tiger fought. They fought each other, and they actually got Ring Fight of the Year. Now it's a real rare thing that Ring Fight of the Year isn't involved with a title. In fact, I might do a little bit of research on that, because I would imagine we're talking very, very low numbers, because generally it's a title fight of some description. Anyway, they were involved in a major fight. They're both down a couple of times. We'll talk to the author in a minute. He'll give us the exact details. And then this guy Frankie DePaula managed to get a title fight against the great Bob Foster, and he got done in a round in this fight, but he maybe didn't get clipped with a proper shot, or perhaps it's not for us to say whether he got clipped with a proper shot, but what he did get is clipped very soon after that, and he got shot, and then he died. But he didn't die suddenly, and I didn't notice. He wasted away in prison, and there's an amazing there's amazing turns and twists in the book. The book's called Jersey Boy, The Life and Mob Slaying of Frankie DePaula, by Adeyinka Makinde, who I'm delighted to say is in the studio with me now. Adey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve.
We'll talk about, if we can, we'll talk about the Jersey Boy book, The Life and Mob Slaying of Frankie DePaula first, and then we'll talk a bit about Dick Tiger, if we can. Now, what inspired you to write the DePaula book? Was it just the fact that he came up when you were doing the Dick Tiger research?
A little bit more than that. I mean, I'd read about him in Boxing Babylon, which was a
Nigel Collins book.
That's right, some years ago, and I think I read it as a serialization in Bert Sugar's Boxing Illustrated. So that kept, was in my mind. And then his name came up in my research of Dick Tiger. Mm-hmm. They fought this amazing battle at Madison Square Garden. They were both on the floor, on the canvas, twice a piece. Amazing, hellacious fight. And so again, when I had the Dick Tiger website going on, I had a special section for that.
For DePaula.
Absolutely. It was an amazing bout. And after the book was released, DePaula's son discovered that and got in touch with me. Told me he'd like me to write a book about his father. I said, oh, hang on, I can't do that. But died when he was 30 years old. What am I going to do about that?
And of course, the thing is, Adey, is that were you born in Nigeria, or
yes?
So you're Nigerian.
Yes.
Dick Tiger was a Nigerian stroke Biafran, depending on what time in history we're talking about it.
Yep.
Because he was most definitely a Biafran at that time, and he's a
yes.
Nigerian in the general scheme of things.
Yes.
But Frankie DePaula is certainly not a Nigerian. He certainly wasn't born in. He certainly wasn't raised in Liverpool or in London like you and like Dick Tiger were.
Yeah.
And he was. So it was a bit of a cultural step to start tracking down Frankie DePaula's history.
Yeah, I suppose so. I was speaking to the son of one of the mob guys I mentioned in the book.
Oh,
James Napoli.
Yes. Joey Knapp.
Jimmy Knapp.
Jimmy Knapp. Oh, fantastic.
What a character. I don't know if you have any kind of character like that in your book.
I've only got characters like that in my book.
Right. Well, Jimmy Knapp was the guy I would say who was there between Frankie Carbo, Blinky Palermo, you know, at the
In
time
the
when
50s
they
and
had
stuff.
the IBC.
Alcatraz.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the coming of Don King and Bob Arum. I would say he was that kind of he was the guy in the interim period
That made it happen. You needed to go
Absolutely.
through Jimmy Knapp to get anywhere.
Exactly.
And Frankie was very involved. Or was he very involved? Do we just assume he was involved because he was DePaula?
He was an associate. He did hang around mobsters. He started like Rocky, the fictional character.
Yeah, this is interesting.
He started, he was a mob collector. You know, he used to go and collect
For the mob.
Absolutely, you know, gambling debts and all the sorts of tithes. You know, local business people would have to pay to a mafia don
to keep going. But he
Absolutely.
now, as a fighter, he was, you know, was obviously brave and he was tough, but he didn't train very hard, or sometimes he didn't train at all. But he did have a following, and he could bang, he could punch.
Absolutely. I mean, that was his main strength. You know, he was what they call a banger.
Yeah.
You know, and he started off basically as a street fighter, which comes in handy if you're going to be a bouncer.
Yeah, of course.
In a hard area like
And an enforcer.
Absolutely. You know, I talked to a lot of British people from that generation, and you know, they've read the book, or even before they read the book, and I tell them stories like Frankie DePaula, and they say, "Oh, blimey, thank goodness I'm not there." I mean, these guys are way harder than what's down there at the East End, mate. You know,
Yeah, they were that whole period there in North Jersey, that whole Jersey City into Hoboken, obviously where Sinatra was from.
Yeah.
Because Sinatra was a friend, too strong a word, associate, knew him.
Yeah, definitely knew him. Definitely came to his fights. You know, we talk about Jimmy Knapp. We're talking about Frank Sinatra. All these people come from the same neighborhood. And I must say, when we talk about mob involvement, of which there was no doubt that it took place, and there's no doubt in the book that Frankie DePaula was involved with them, you've got to also think on the level that, you know, the Italian Americans, like the Irish Americans, Jewish Americans, you know, they were into boxing. You know, he would have come from a generation, Jimmy Knapp, when, you know, you had neighborhood champions.
Sure.
You know, before you got up to world champions.
And you went over to watch them fight wherever they were fighting.
So they were fans to start with. And Sinatra was definitely a big boxing fan, and I'm sure you know about how he helped guys like Joe Louis and Sugar Ray Robinson financially.
He did, and lots of things that Frank Sinatra. I'd love to read a really good Frank Sinatra book one day, a really good one instead of the sort of usual stuff. Now, so Frankie DePaula has this incredible fight with Dick Tiger, who at the time is, you know, he's already established as a great fighter. But that stage, he's already won. He's won the middleweight, and he's about to win the light heavyweight.
No, he's recently been dethroned by Bob Foster.
Okay, so
earlier in '68.
Okay, so he fights him after he loses to Bob Foster.
That's right.
But he's won his middleweight title. He's won his light heavyweight world title after this improbable. We'll talk about Dick Tiger in a moment in detail. After this improbable start, and it's the most unbelievable piece of British boxing history that's really undiscovered, and it's the influx of West African fighters and Jamaican fighters in the 50s. I've been working on this and pitching this and talking to people like this for about 10 years. A great period. That 50s period is a great period. And I'll tell you why, because my father was an amateur boxer, and he trained at St Pancras in North London. And they used to go to a gym in Fitzroy Square, and inside this gym, it was known as a black gym. Well, in fact, back then it was known as a coloured gym.
Right.
And in this gym, there were always Africans and Jamaicans, always in this gym. And my dad used to go down there and train sometimes because it was decent sparring. It was close to where he lived, as opposed to the gym, which was a little bit further away. And I've always been fascinated by that. By 1960, 61, there being a gym in central London packed full of West Indian immigrant fighters and African fighters, and that's what Dick Tiger did. But we'll go on to that in a minute. I tend to do this a lot. I tend to float about. To be honest with you, Ed, it's my show. I can do what I like. If I speak to the guy in there and say I want, I don't know, McFadden and Whitehead, the disco version, 12 minutes long, we'll have 12 minutes of that, and we'll come back in 12 minutes. But I wouldn't do that because there's a lot of people listening. It's a very popular show. So tell me about the Jersey boy DePaula when he finally gets in the ring with Bob Foster. What happens? What goes wrong?
Well, I mean, the first thing that is a bit curious is that he actually leaves Foster on the floor for a while.
Right at the start of the fight.
Yeah.
Bizarre, that.
A bit of a shock. A lot of people look at that carefully and they think, oh, it was a bit of a shove.
It's a punch shove.
Yeah.
But it's a punch.
Absolutely, because he seemed to be going, trying to dig for the body there.
Yeah, it's just a shot, then he's off balance. That still counts as a shot.
Yeah. So Foster didn't like it, and
to say the least,
goes to the floor, but comes back after the mandatory 8. But then Frankie then makes about 3 quick descents, and of course the New York boxing rules in those days, you're down 3 times. Doesn't matter if you're not groggy and looking like grandma, or on the whiskey or whatever. You're out. And he didn't look too banged up. He'd taken harder punches from Dick Tiger.
Didn't have a shower. He said, I can't have a shower. Don't deserve a shower. But he'd taken a much harder punch from Dick Tiger and other people during his career. But the thing is, did he complain? Did he moan? Did he scream? Did his corner moan and complain and scream?
Not at all. They just said it was a bit slippery.
He sold all those tickets. He's an Irish American fighting this great champion Bob Foster at the Garden, where he'd already had a lot of fights. He had a following. Why weren't they going crazy? Why weren't they throwing things at the ring in disgust, Adey? I've never understood that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Why not?
That's a good one. I think they were just so shocked and disappointed about it.
And they got him out of the ring too quick. A bit like Kevin Mitchell recently against the Australian kid Michael Katsidis. Got bashed up for 3 rounds and it was over, and the crowd didn't realise. It was almost like they were stunned.
All right, yes.
Maybe. I mean, maybe.
Possibly that. I know DePaula's... there were complaints. I mean, you'd see...
Afterwards, proper complaints.
Yeah. But even during the fight, somebody mentioned something like, they ain't going to pay me $2 to come and watch this. Actually, not $2, $30,
Yeah, it's a decent price.
For 1960s. And I think Frankie's brother was somewhere in the stands. He punched this guy in the face.
Who sort of suggested his brother was a bum, so he punched him. And then he goes back to Jersey City. He has a good night out that night, if I'm not mistaken.
He goes to Manhattan, a restaurant in the company of his manager, Garofalo and Jimmy Knapp.
Yeah, okay.
The guy who's pulling the strings behind.
Not with the sort of teenage girlfriend at that stage.
Oh, no,
she hadn't shown up yet.
She hadn't yet showed up. The mafia princess.
I got to tell you, this book, okay, now obviously I've written a work of fiction called The Fixer, set in the world of boxing, but this book, okay, it's fact, okay, and it's a cracking read. There's some really good stuff in it, and it's gone. I'm a big fan of going under radars. Okay, I like to drag things that have gone under radars out, and this book has gone under the radar. So I'm doing my bit tonight, public service broadcasting, BBC and all, to drag it out of the radar. So the Bob Foster fight is 1969, 22nd of January.
That's right.
He has 2 wins after that, even though he's already been sort of charged with something. He's already been some sort of suggestion.
Copper robbery
and then
perjury.
And he gets shot in 1970, doesn't he?
That's right.
And he finally dies many months later.
4 months later.
It's a horrible, slow...
It is.
Slow, horrible death. So, what happens when he's shot? What can you give away? What can you give away so that come on, give us a clue.
Well,
did the bad guys do it, Adey, or was it inept hired hands, or was it some locals that knew him? Come, what's your gut feeling?
Gut feeling? It was the mob leaders of Hoboken, New Jersey. I'll stick my neck out and say that.
Yeah. Now this is going to be my next question. You're off to New Jersey soon, aren't you?
Hopefully, yes.
To do a bit of promotion for it. If I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
is that right? That's
absolutely.
what I'm assuming you're going to do.
Yes, oh yeah.
Aren't you a little bit concerned? Because these guys, they live a lot longer than they should. No, I mean that. I mean, they've done nothing but they've done nothing but illegal drugs, drink and eat rich food, and dance with their their girlfriends who are often prostitutes. They've had this incredible life, but they still live to 85. How does that work? So aren't you a little bit concerned?
Yeah.
Because you do name a lot of names in the book, Aid.
Yeah, a couple of them, yeah.
No, a few more on the couple. few more on the couple, my friend.
Well, a lot of them are dead now.
Phew, thank God for that.
John DiGilio, hard man, names. Dead. Ziccarelli, dead. Jimmy Knapp, dead. Passed away.
But passed away very old, like in a real old age.
Yeah.
Garofalo's dead, isn't he, obviously?
He's in a nursing home.
He's in a nursing home. Oh, God, he's not dead. What about Garofalo's son? If he's got one.
Garofalo had one son who I know one of the people I interviewed was a bit cautious about saying this because he knew this particular son was a bit of a violent guy, but he died a few years ago.
Okay, well, I'm not saying it's good he's dead, but perhaps it is good he's dead for your health.
I was there in 2007, you know,
so you did okay then.
I had to steal it, you know, and you know.
Well, let me just say this book, Jersey Boy: The Life and Mob Slaying of Frankie DePaula, by Adeyinka Makinde, is absolutely sensational. How can people get hold of it, Aid?
Go on to Amazon.com
and get it that way.
Get it that way. Also, you can go to your local bookshop. So just Google the ISBN number
and then
then ask your bookshop to order it.
So if you are listening online and if you are listening live, it's called Jersey Boy by Adeyinka Makinde. This is a good way to get it, but also Amazon. And if you're listening on BBC iPlayer, same rules. Let's just talk for a couple of seconds, if we can, about your Dick Tiger book. It came out a few years ago, and Dick Tiger is this guy Dick Tiger. I mean, how there's not been a movie made about this guy, I don't know. How the poet laureate hasn't penned poems in honor of this guy. He's not just one of the best, well, not just one of the greatest champions, in my opinion. If you look at a career overall, not just having a little 2-year period, look at the hardship the guy has to come through. You know, he's right up there. He's in a top 50. He's in the top 50 of fighters now. With regard to his position within Africa, there's only a Zuma Nelson, in my opinion, that comes anywhere close to touching him. And perhaps, you know, how difficult Dick Tiger's early life was, going to Liverpool, losing all those early fights, having really no right to get anywhere where he got in the end. How is Dick Tiger perceived back in Nigeria now, considering his Biafran stance?
Well, largely forgotten man, unfortunately.
That's a disgrace.
It is, really, because you consider that in his lifetime, before the war started, he was the greatest hero Nigeria had. You know, they fought a big match, Dick Tiger versus Gene Fulmer. You know, former world champion at Ibadan, Nigeria, promoted by Jack Solomons, and Jack Hart, referee from England, came over. That was the first fight in Black Africa before the Rumble in the Jungle. And he was a hero of immense proportions, you know, lionized. Hey, you talk about poet laureates. You've got calypso songs written about him. You know, him and Hog and Kid Bassey. You know, but he was such a big hero, and his prestige went down when he took sides in the Civil War. He felt he had no choice but to support a secession which was done largely by people of his ethnic group.
Igbo.
The Igbo people, that's right. And he did whatever he could. You remember that Biafran towel, or
the robe.
The robe, the Foster fight, and you know, he'd first worn that when he fought Roger Rouse. You know, the troubles had already started when he fought those two battles with Jose Torres, but he was still a Nigerian then. And he gave his MBE back, or sent it back to the American embassy in Washington. Absolutely, that was after John Lennon had handed his in, and
it's all the rage handing those in. But how can people get hold of the Dick Tiger book? Same way?
Same way.
Listen, Aid, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I really mean that. It's an absolute delight. I'll stay in touch with you because I'm going to do more on this that whole forgotten history in British boxing, when they're all
absolutely
African
the
and West Indian fighters.
Era,
and also great names. We should talk about some of the names. We could have talked a bit longer, because some of the names, in their record, some of those names those guys adopted both before they came from Ghana and Nigeria, before they came over from Barbados and Jamaica. Adeyinka Makinde, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Now